the local community, you might like to know, especially the tourism operators. Ken came and asked me about it before. What we've actually done is created a hotel hanger. So on your door, you know, like the hotels where you go and you save water and don't put your towels in. What we've done is, thanks for staying at our Night Sky friendly venue. And on the back it says, what this means is that we keep our outdoor lights to a minimum and only use them when we need them. We use warm colour temperature lights. We put all our lights down, and we look forward to having people who love stargazing, engage with nocturnal animals, embrace our global night heritage, reduce their carbon footprint, and aren't afraid of the dark. So, if you want to use that as a moment,
yes, please.
yeah. All right. So we've got a few more coming now.
Tonight, too.
What I'd like to do is introduce you to Peter Shooter, who will be sharing this session this afternoon. We've got the powerhouse this afternoon, so 3 keynote speakers in a row. And Peter, it's over to you. Thank you. Yes.
Yes, okay, our first speaker for this afternoon is Dr. Kellie Pendoley, International Dark Sky Association and Pendoley Environment. She's speaking on light pollution, recognising and defining the problem.
All right. Hello. I have to say, when I agreed to do this 6 months ago, I had ideas about what I thought I'd talk about, and then, you know, over the ensuing months, I wasn't sure what else would be talked about over these 2 days. So I realised that I'm probably doing okay. Some of what I was going to talk about I've removed. So it's really an area that I think people need to be aware of when we talk about light pollution, light monitoring. We have trouble with the language of this, the language of light. People aren't really clear about what it is we're talking about. So I just want to give you a little bit of a lesson in the language of light. So it might sound a little bit like your high school or university lectures. Bear with me, it's only 40 minutes. I can handle it. All right. So basically, I want to just briefly go through, define what light pollution is. We've heard a bit of this before. Some of that theory, theoretical language of light, very little bit about ecology. It's all been done now, so I picked out those slides. How do you measure biologically meaningful light? This is an issue that we've been talking about at Alarm for the last few years, the artificial light at night conferences, and the light pollution theory modelling and measurement conferences. How do you, the regulation of light, like what, you know, briefly touched on the regulation out there that controls light, and then how I see us moving forward. So, as we know, traditional view of light, it's a positive thing, it's an indicator of wealth. Rich countries have lots of light. It extends the time that we can work and play, extends growing seasons, you can use greenhouses at night, and it really does give humans that sense of safety and security. This image on the right is a stairway down to the Turtle Western Beach in Port Hedland. So you can imagine if the stairs look like that, what the rest of the beach looks like. So let's talk about pollution. What is pollution? Because that's what this is. It's all about light being a pollution. And as Professor Haim said, it's a toxic introduction of something toxic into the environment. It's the presence or introduction of a substance that has harmful effects, and it might not have a harmful effect in some circumstances, but it will in others. So when we think about light as a pollutant, there's a lot of different ways that it is a pollutant. It pollutes our vision of the sky, so the loss of the sky, of the night sky, and all the implications for art and literature, astronomy, navigation, tourism, things like that. There's light as a pollutant in terms of nuisance light trespass. Light shining in the neighbour's bedroom window. And I've seen this in Perth. I had a lady call me up once who was being taken to court by the council because her neighbour was using a light as a weapon to shine it from her house back onto the other lady's house. And it was like a torture thing. And she put up this big barrier, and the council came along and said, no, you can't do that, tear it down. So it turned into this huge issue. So it's a big thing for the council, so I think it's going to get worse. LED glare, car headlights. I turn 60 in the next week or so. And believe you me, I can't see when those headlights are coming towards me. Terrible. Human health aspects we know all about, and then of course the ecological impacts, which we just talked about. So what is light? Well, I found a few different definitions. Natural agent that stimulates sight and makes things visible. That's pretty nice. Brightness that comes from the sun. Good. But my personal favourite is last one. Electromagnetic radiation of any wavelength travels in a vacuum with a speed of 299,792, 458 metres per second. And specifically such radiation that is visible to the human eye. That's the issue here, right? Keep that in mind. So this is something that I put out because it blew me away. I went to this light pollution theory modelling and measurement conference in France, Canada, prior to the artificial light conference in 2015, and there was 45 people in the room, mainly men, you know. A couple of us younger ladies. But, you know, I got up, talked to all these astronomers and these physicists, and I'm like, you know, and I'm struggling to measure light pollution. And, you know, I said, light is complex and complicated topic. Few outside this room understand. And then Chris Kuyper, who we met from yesterday, gets up next and goes, yeah, I agree. He said, but I think I can add a few inside the room understand it either. And I'm like, whoa, if that's how I'm feeling, you know, the rest of them are in the same boat. But it's really important to understand the theory of light. If we're going to measure it, we're going to talk about it, we're going to regulate it. We have to know how to measure it. Right, so here's theory bit. Strap on your skates, okay? Light is part of the electromagnetic radiation spectrum, right? This is energy. So it's not so light is a part of this whole spectrum, and within it, so the electromagnetic spectrum includes everything: radio waves, microwaves, infrared, visible, jammed in the middle, out to gamma rays. And when we talk about light, we then tend to talk about it, characterise it as either radiometric or photometric. Has anyone here heard those words?
Every day.
All right, you guys. All right. And if I say something stupid,
No, quite all right. You do very well.
all right. So this is a biologist talking, right? I was a chemist once, but so let's talk a little bit about radiometry. Okay, so radiometry is a measurement detection of all wavelengths of light across the whole spectrum. So if you're having a party, everyone's invited, okay? No one's more special than anyone else. Every wavelength, all's just as important as each other. And that goes from 380 nanometers to 750 or whatever. I hear different numbers reported. But, you know, it's that sort of purple bit through to the dark red. Not weighted or calibrated in any way. This is radiometry, okay? Then we got photometry. So photometry is when we talk about light. It's a subset of this radiometry, subset of that whole visible spectrum of wavelengths, okay? And it refers to light that is perceived by the human eye. The human eye, okay? It's represented by this CIE curve, which was created by a bunch of, I don't know what they were, physicists, I don't know what they were, a bunch of French guys back in the 1930s. And it was a way of trying to model light so that we could measure it and we could talk about it equally and between people. And it basically represents this part of the spectrum that the human eye is most sensitive to. And you can see if there is some blips in this party. So green and yellow, very highly weighted. So it is calibrated. It's a calibration curve. And when you're measuring light, you're measuring it under this curve. The other thing to note here, and I'll talk about this a lot more, is that what it is measuring. Right? It's not measuring the red, not measuring, or very, very low weighted to the violet and the blue. And this is important when we want to know about blue light, isn't it? And the other point, I didn't have what I took off, but has anyone ever worked in, work sites where there's green eye wash stations? There's green lights over them, always coloured green. Anyone notice that? Well, this is why, because green's the last colour that the eye is most sensitive to. So it's no accident that it'd be green. Okay, the other terms we need to understand is photopic vision, scotopic vision. So photopic is that vision under bright light, and again, it's been alluded to the last couple of days, but I'm just trying to bring it all together here. It's detected by the cones in our eye, and it's those sensors that detect colour. Okay. Scotopic vision is the vision that kicks in low light levels. Okay. It activated at night, so in humans and animals, activated under very low light levels, detected by the rods, so different detectors, and it only sees lights in shades of grey. And when I read one of the sites online, they're like, detects in 50 shades of grey. I don't think so. I haven't got a reference for that. So it's 50 out. But there's no colour, and that's really important when we're starting to look at light at night, how we're going to manage it with different species. Colour isn't an issue when you've got low light levels. So both humans and wildlife have photopic and scotopic vision. But as we know, and you'll see a slide again, you've seen before, animals and humans see light differently. And I will add that I did get permission from Sylvia to use this, which Karen quite happily ripped off. Anyway, the only point I want to make here is that, all the different wildlife, different taxa see light differently. And I will come back to this. Okay, so the other thing I want to talk about, more terminology, correlated colour temperature. Again, it's a photopic measure, it's photometry. It's another way that we describe light sources. You'll hear it a lot when we talk about LEDs, expressed in Kelvin, and it ranges from this warm yellow colour up to a cool white. That's how we describe it. And what's important to know is that it doesn't tell you anything about the blue in the light. We always assume that a cool white LED has a lot of blue in it. And it usually does, but you don't know that for sure. And the same way you're assuming there's not much in this, there is. Okay? And that's the danger that people go, oh, use these warm white lights and they're going to be okay, because they're not. Right, so I thought this was going to be a lot more everyone take in, so I'll do a summary slide after each section. So, messages here. Visible light ranges from 400 to 700. We can describe light as radiometric and photometric. Thank you. What's the difference? Who comes to the party in radiometric light? Everybody. Right, photometric, just the bits. Eyes contain photoreceptors that detect light differently. So cones detect colour in bright light, and it's photopic vision. Rods see in shades of grey in dim light, and it's scotopic. Photoreceptor sensitivities varies between species, so this one is wildlife. CCT, the warm yellow to the cool white, and doesn't tell you anything about the blue in it. Okay, so we've heard today, yesterday, life evolved over millions of years of this 24-hour cycle of light and dark. It's only been the last couple of hundred years that we've upset that cycle, and wildlife is struggling to catch up. I think it's probably starting to adapt, but it's going to take a long time for that to happen. And we know from the research that is growing. And again, when I first Google, well, it wasn't even Google, back in 1990, there was no Google. Actually, we didn't even have computers, so you had to go to a library to look for literature on light and wildlife. There was nothing. Bit on turtles, which I'm going to talk about because I can, even though Karen's done it. But now we know everything's affected by light. It's becoming more and more accepted. It's the norm. 25 years ago it wasn't. So, again, and what was that, look at this, I mean, I hadn't really put all the literature together, but to us all this is like everything is responding to the mood, everything. That was the first for me. This is only a few months ago. I'm like, wow, that is an issue. And this is that high energy short wavelength light. It's high energy, so it's dangerous. It can kill things. So it's very highly visible under that scotopic, that dark adaptive vision. And the thing we deal with is that it scatters in the sky really well. So if you've got bright white light shining over, a dust storm, a lot of aerosols coming from an scatter and create a huge area of glow. And that's an issue for us when we deal with turtles. But as we know, and here's that CIE curve, it's that light that's outside of this curve. So it's not something we're talking about and measuring when we're measuring photometric light. So here's my turtle bit, and I'm going to tell Kelly's going to talk about it, but light as a cue to find the ocean. They do respond to wavelength and colour. I know I did the experiments. I had lots and lots of little flatback hatchlings in little tiny runways with different coloured filtered lights on either end, and I tested it. So remember is that I did experiments where I had really, really, really low intensity blue light, and I offered them really high intensity red light, and they always went for the red light. So given a choice, a high intensity light is going to override that colour choice. So yes, there is no such thing as a turtle friendly light, and it's been killing me that the lighting industry has been talking that way for years. The other issue, and Karen talked about it, they use a lot of cues to find the ocean. They orient away from those tall, dark dunes. So they use it as a cue that they're repelled by that tall, dark horizon. They're moving away from it, and they're moving towards that low light horizon over the ocean. And it's a broad, low light horizon. Okay, there's a little bit of light on the ocean. You can see it at night, even when there's no moon, starlight illuminated. But it's a broad area. They're not crawling towards the moon, okay? Because often when we work, moon's rising behind the dunes. So why would you want to be attracted to a light source behind the dunes? So it's that moonlight that illuminates the ocean that they're attracted to, which Karen correctly pointed out. They're impacted by both direct light, so point sources and sky glow. And the issue here to consider is a point source, at the end of this room is going to be glaringly bright, but a point source on the top of that hill over there is not going to look a lot different to a star. So again, when you're managing lights, it's all about its intensity, but it's all that perspective and distance. And they can be disoriented over tens of kilometres. So for us, when we're dealing with this, the impact, when we're looking at the impact of light on turtles, there's all sorts of competing factors that we have to take into account. There's biological cues and environmental factors. So, this year, with clouds coming, right, over a light source, these are clouds reflecting that light back onto the Earth. Those clouds are really high, then it changes how much light's reflected. If they're really low, it increases it. If they're thick, it increases it. If they're thin and high, it's like, there's all these factors that change the intensity of the light and the visibility of the light. The moon fades, the moon's out, then an artificial light may be far less influential than when there's no moon. It's just a light. So what we find is that trying to set prescriptive limits to account for all these variables is almost impossible. It really is. And I know it's what the engineers want, but you know what? We can't do it. Many species, so this is my summary. So many species are attracted to these short wavelengths, violet blue light. Scotopic rods are in a lot of animals, and they are sensitive to that short wavelength blue light. And yet, biology is fluffy. It is fluffy. You know, you get it through your head, it's fluffy. And setting prescriptive limits is difficult. Right, so here's, I'll whip through this because it'll probably, I'm not doing too bad. Right, so if you get about there and measure light, okay, or you got some technician that's going to do it, and say, right, I'm going to go do some light for you. Okay. And they start talking in terms of irradiance, radiance, radiant flux. Those terms are radiometric terms. Remember, what's radiometry? Everyone at the party. Right. Units of joules, watts, magnitudes per arc second squared. They've probably given you that broad measure of that broad range of light. If, on the other hand, someone's talking to you about luminance and luminous flux, and they're using a light meter or a luminance meter or a spectroradiometer or a luminance meter, and they're giving you values in lux, lumens, candela, candle, all my personal favourite, nits. They're real. Then they're not giving you light that's out in these areas, okay? All they're giving you is a measure of the light under this curve. So you think about the implications of that. All the biological studies that are done that are measuring in lux, measuring this, okay? And that's fine if you've got the same light and you're measuring the same light from one study to the next or one day to the next, because you'll have the same, you know, peaks in your spectral power curve. But if you're using different lights or over time, you know, the curves change, then you're getting different values, different measures underneath that curve. You're not measuring the same thing anymore. So it's an important point to make. It's an important point for people to understand what is it you're measuring, and is it meaningful from the point of view of the species that you're dealing with. So I know, Alicia, you talked about the use of spectroradiometer, and I thought, brilliant, but you can't quantify light with those things. And so, you know, you can see this power curve, so it's good for giving you that qualitative view of light, but not the quantitative. Yeah. What else? All right, so we talked about years, you know, I mean, it might change another 12 now. Again, we talk about LED. It doesn't tell you how much fluid is in an LED light, but it, you know, a white LED light will when we talk about 4,000 street lights, you know, we probably use something like all LED, all white LED lights contain blue light. I did that yesterday. They all start out as blue and and again, here's the point: little or none of that is measured by photometric equivalent. And that has biological impact. Okay, so photometric instruments have limited value for doing biological monitoring. Okay, I'm not saying they're no good, because if you are comparing light with light, they do standardised, you can But really radiometric instruments are a better way to go. But again, if you're going to do that, there's certain factors that you need to have in that instrument. Okay, so they've got to measure that whole party right across the spectrum, equally weighted. Everyone else is just as important. They have to be sensitive to very low light levels. So what I find with a lot of lux meters and a lot of these commercial instruments, the detection limits are really high. They're useful to measure under a light bulb here, or maybe 100 metres out from a light. But if you're trying to measure a light a kilometre away with a lux meter, you're kidding yourself. Can't be done, okay? Even with luminance meters where you're sort of targeting it, there's still limitations around what that's really measuring. You've got to be able to measure light on the horizon. So again, a lot of equipment might measure overhead. So the sky quality meters, we all, they're good. They're giving you photometric information, but they're only you can only measure that zenith. You can't do this on the horizon. It's nonsense to say that. So for us, turtles crawl down the beach and they stand up in the little flippers and they look out. They're looking up to about 30 degrees high. They're not looking overhead. Okay, so. And you've got to be able to measure light on a landscape scale. Okay, so again, my lights, from the city are 100 kilometres away. How are you going to measure that with a commercial instrument? You can't. So I wasn't going to do this, but I thought, well, it is what I've been doing 25 years. Can't work on it. So ages ago, I got in touch with an astronomer in Perth. He's the technical manager. He was great, and he really helped me out. We tried all sorts of things. He gave me the telephotometer to play with that the astronomers had left out in the rain. Sorry. But he wouldn't let me have it back. He gave it to me to go to Barrow Island. We tried all sorts of equipment, and finally one day came and he said, I found this great thing. It's Santa Barbara Instrument Group all-sky camera. And so I used that for a long time, an astronomical camera. Great, but the problem was it was attenuated on two sides. I couldn't get a full 360-degree horizon. So we started working on building our own cameras, getting a little digital camera with fisheye lens. I got a whole geek squad at work. I've had a string of physics students that all went up to do PhDs. And we built this equipment that we could use, put out in the field, stand alone, leave it overnight, turtles can run over it, leave it up in 50 minutes, take photos, and we get these images, which we can then get some quantitative and qualitative data from. And believe me, the value of taking an image like that and slapping it on the desk of an engineer and saying, you reckon there's no light out there? Check this out. Very valuable. We worked on this for about 25 years, and I'm pleased to say that just this year, some of the European guys have done a big review of light monitoring equipment, and they concluded that these calibrated digital cameras are the best way forward for measuring light. So it's sort of validated what we've been doing all this time, buried out here in Australia and West Australia, which is even further away, in isolation. So measuring light, I'm not going to run through that because I want to make sure I get to my final slide, but a little bit. So photometric instruments, what are they measuring? Light for the human eye, don't measure light visible to animals, radiometric, measure all the light, and they measure light that's visible to both humans and animals. I won't. You guys will remember what I just talked about. Yeah. All right, so legislation and standards. So this is important. So in working with Kerry and Fiona to prepare these guidelines, we've started to dive into what's out there, what legislations and standards are out there around light pollution. And really, when you look at everything that's available, historically light standards, regulation have been set to protect human health and safety. And so they've only ever set minimum levels of light that you need to use. The engineers are free to add whatever they want to that, right? Whatever they want. There's no limit. There's no upper limit anywhere on the light. The two exceptions, I guess, and I have to say this because I do so many, is the the dark sky planning guidelines for here and AS 4282. But they're not for biological purposes. These are for astronomy here, and the 4282 is specifically excluded by IOTA because of the difficulty with measuring it, or it was too diverse to address. So in all the legislation and standards that we've looked at across Australia, there's no recognition of light pollution, okay? No specific recognition in the environmental legislation. The one exception is Queensland, where they do actually mention light, okay? WA gets close. Electromagnetic radiation, which if you didn't know, wouldn't realise that actually applies to light as well. I think most people think of that as being nuclear stuff. So, but none of it specifically addressing medicine lighting for the protection of flora and fauna.
Can I just? Radio astronomers have done what we've done here in terms of legislation to protect us.
I'll have to talk to them and figure out how they did it. They're right on their coattails. So, all right, well, I'm actually doing really good time here, so I'm going to finish up early. So, when I think about this, I thought, oh, okay, what's the takeaway message? And I struggled over this one for a while. I only really finalised this a few days ago. But these are the issues that I think we need to think about. Who recognises it just from the conversations I've heard the last 2 days. Yeah. And it needs to be regulated under both state and Commonwealth environmental regulations. It needs to be treated as an environmental pollutant. We need to come up with standard methods for measuring or standard. Right now, there's all sorts of different ways of doing it. You know, some of the biologists are using, photometric equipment, and others of us are using cameras and things like that. We can't measuring the same way, the same equipment, the same units. So that was critical, and that's the sort of thing that we think about at these ALA conferences and the light pollution theory environmental measurement conferences. The next one will be in Hungary next year, if anyone's interested in that one. Engineering standards in the legislation need to recognise an upper limit on artificial light at night. We've got to put some roof on this somehow. I don't know how, but we have to start talking about an upper limit. And we need to recognise, regulators, engineers, that we can't regulate this with a one size fits all standards approach. Okay, wildlife, biology can't be fitted into those narrow parameters of standards. Okay, it just doesn't work. We need to risk assess. Each and every time we're putting lights in, it should be risk assessed, environmental risk assessment done on the impact of those lights, and then managed on a case-by-case basis. And I know it sounds huge. It's not that bad. We've been doing it as environmental practitioners. We've been doing it with developers and projects for years, 20-odd years we've been doing this sort of thing. And, a big project, it is a big thing to deal with, but once it's done, you've got your light management plan in place and off you go. The government's used to assessing this sort of thing. So it's the ways and the methods of doing this are out there, and the people that know how to do it are out there. In doing these guidelines with Karen and Fiona, one of the questions I realised when we discovered that we went through all the different sources of light in Australia, and we tried to address all of them. But, of course, street lighting came up as a major one, and the more we look at it, it is a major one. It's huge. And, you know, I said to Karen, have you ever had a street lighting project referred to the Commonwealth Government under the EPBC Act? Because under that Act, anything that has the potential to have a significant impact on an endangered or migratory species has to be assessed. And no one's ever done it. And how can we say that street lighting has never had an impact on a shearwater or a marine turtle or a, any other listed species? It has, but it's flying under the radar because we all need street lights, and therefore, geez, we can't get difficult about this. Well, we need to. We need to start thinking about it, bringing it in under another form of light pollution that has to be managed just like any other source. So why should Chevron spend 2 years and millions of dollars doing an impact assessment on their lighting design for a gas plant on Barrow Island, and yet a city on the coast can just willy-nilly put up all the lights they want? This doesn't make sense to me. And we need to monitor the impacts biologically, okay? It's fine, again, working with Australian Standards 4282, I had to go look at the light for an old man down at Nottingham who had this light shining in his backyard, and I stood there and went, that couldn't meet the standards. I did some measurements with my lumens meter, and I went back, no, it doesn't meet the standards. And the engineers come back, this does. No, it doesn't, I said, this does. We've modelled it. You don't do field measurements, they're meaningless. We've modelled it. So I'm like, you're joking, you go stand in that old boy's backyard. It was terrible. There's no humanity in these guidelines. That's the thing that got to me, it's numbers. There's no humans going out and looking at it and assessing whether it's acceptable or not. So for us, we do that for the wildlife. We go out and we monitor the hatchlings, and so, we've done that. Barrow Island, we have thousands of data points of hatchling fans. We've got all this light data. We can integrate the two, and we can show that biologically there has been no impact from this $75 billion gas plant that's been constructed with gas flares the size of 3 football fields, have not impacted on the hatchlings. Who would have thought? I mean, I never would have thought that. We're stunned. A little bit upset by that. And I think it's not all bad news. Our skies here in Australia are still incredible. It really is. Like we talk about how bad the cities are. Yes, they are. But we still have these amazing skies, and they are an amazing resource, and they need to be treated that way. And so, I think we have to recognise it as the ocean and the land and the marine parks and things like that. Those dark skies are a natural resource that has a conservation value that needs to be protected under legislation, just like any other natural asset that we have here.
Any questions? Yes.
Thanks, that's great. I've got 2 responses, 1 comment and then 1 question. Is very, very different for an insect, for example. So my insects can be in an environment that's actually quite dark and quite bright for a bird, and vice versa. So, and this is going to be the major problem, because if you start talking about wildlife, people think if you ask people to name animals, it will be birds and mammals every time. You'll often be animals and birds and mammals. So we need to start thinking on scale as well. So how do you think we're going to start incorporating that in this ecological stuff? Because that is a tricky beast.
Yes.
Christine.
So Kellie, on your take-home messages, you said we need to set an upper limit, and then your next dot point said on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
Just wanted you to reflect on that.
Yeah. No, I think it should be case by case, but I think if we've got standards out there that say you can have, one lux shining in a window, then I think there needs to be, you know, and that's the intrusive standards, right? But if you've got street lighting that says, you know, 25 lux light shining on the highway, then there needs to be another line there that says, but you can't just keep adding more and more of those lights, or you can't, you can't just uncontrolled addition of light to that, whatever that standard is. And I don't know.
Base that on?
Well, we're up to this one.
What would you base it on? Given the next concept is case by case basis, so whether you're dealing with insects or birds or.
I don't know, I've gone that far, actually.
Okay.
It's just discussion points. Yeah, no, you're right. It is a bit of conflict with this, but it's just something we need to think about.
Yeah.
I have to say, sorry.
Whoa, no question here. Thank you.
The UK was considered this, is there legislation that deals with light nuisance? There are no units at all, no nuisance. If somebody makes a formal complaint, then it's regarded as criminal place areas, that it's committed. No, you would think along that side.
I guess the other problem would be those nuisance complaints where someone's complaining about the neighbour because they don't like them, you know. And I think so for councils, it would be difficult for them to work on that premise. I mean, I like the idea of it, but I can see where they go, well, we're that.
Oh, no, I was just going on the same point that the Australian Lighting Summit, I was talking to one of the lighting engineers that there was a railway station that lit to 100 bucks, and the lighting engineers were really proud of themselves, and they were actually wanting to go to 200. Fair enough, isn't it? Yeah, and they wasn't.
So yeah, it's like I say, maybe in standards you have or some concept of an upper limit, but you don't set it, and then you do that based on your case by case assessment.
Quickly, I really liked how you were talking about different ways that we can measure, because that's something I've been struggling with and have been using lights. But this calibrated digital cameras, are they easy just for everybody to use? Can you maybe sort of get them up to that paper that you use?
You do that paper would help. Yeah, I can talk to you about it later because we work with it, and there's software out there that you can access. But it's there's some issues around that, and some limitations around it as well. So.
Last question.
I'll just make a comment if I may. You're quite right that Case 4282 excludes biota, but the new version has an appendix right in.
That excludes biota.
But it specifically addresses the issues that may come up.
Yeah.
So, you know, watch this space. The next
version, absolutely. And so I actually was happy to see the changes in the last version of AS 4282 because it is addressing far more than just the house next to the commercial light district.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's
Thanks very much. Could you put your hands together again?